Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I am here today once again at the Rock Island Auction Company. I'm taking a look at some of the guns that they are going to be selling in the upcoming February of 2016 regional auction. And there's one in here that is one of many varieties of this pistol. They're interesting and different and cool, and it's about time that we took a look at one. This is a Le Français pistol. They were manufactured by a company called Manufrance, which is actually sort of the commercial manufacturing arm of the Saint-Étienne arsenal complex. So they made more than just handguns, but they did make a lot of handguns. And this is kind of one of the standby long production pistols that was made by Manufrance. So these were first designed and patented first designed in 1912 by a fellow named Etienne Mimard. I think that name is right. Patented in 1913 and first put into production in 1914, just in time for World War I to pretty much cease production of them until the end of the war. But these were made in several different varieties, everything from military models in 9mm Parabellum all the way down to little tiny pocket models in 25 ACP. This particular one is in 32 ACP. Now normally we think of a 32 as being like a 1920s or 1930s interwar sort of gun. Well, in France, it's a little bit different. So legally in France for quite some time, it's been illegal for citizens to own firearms in military calibers. And the French had been using the 32 ACP cartridge as a military handgun cartridge for quite some time. They used it in World War I, that first adopted it, with the Ruby pistols. And they went on to use those Rubies for quite some time. It wasn't until 1950 that they finally removed those from military usage, and only at that point did 32 ACP become legal as a civilian pistol cartridge. So in 1950, Manufrance actually introduced 32 ACP models of the Le Français for commercial sale. So that gives us an easy way to date this pistol. It was made sometime between 1950 and the end of production in 1969. Considering all the different versions, in total over 250,000 of these pistols were made, which is quite a lot. They are fairly scarce here in the United States, though. Not a lot of them ever got imported for any particular reason. I think they may have been a little too weird for GIs to bring home as souvenirs or for anyone to ever really have a good reason to import into the US. So with all of that in mind, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the inside of this and how it works, because it's got a lot of weird quirks to it. So there are a lot of interesting quirks to the Le Français. The first one is that this has a tip-up barrel. So when I pull down the latch, the barrel pops open, and that allows you to manually load a cartridge straight into the barrel rather than operating the slide after you load the magazine. That's certainly handy for people who don't have the grip strength to operate a slide. I'm not sure that was necessarily one of the primary objectives with this pistol. Instead, the idea was to make it simple and cost-effective to manufacture. On the early guns, because it had a tip-up barrel, they didn't bother putting an extractor in the slide. Now, these later production, post-World War II guns do have an extractor, which means if you have a live round in the chamber, you can pull the slide back and eject that round. On the earlier guns, you actually couldn't do that. If you wanted to take the round out, you would pop the barrel and pull the round out there. Now, an interesting side note to that is the magazine. It's an 8-round magazine plus one in the barrel, in the chamber, and the magazine release is this button built right into the side of the magazine. So I pull that down, and when I pull the magazine out, the barrel automatically pops up. The idea being, if I am out of ammunition, I would reload the magazine or get a new magazine, put in a loaded magazine, put one round, pop into the chamber, close that, and now I'm ready to fire. I don't have to operate the slide because of one of the other quirks of this pistol. With the intent of safety in mind, these were designed to be hammerless, they're striker fired, and they have a double action only trigger. So you can see the striker tail coming out here. You do not actually have to rack the slide to recock this. You have a full double action trigger pull every time you fire. So I can put in a magazine, put one in the chamber, and pull the trigger, and the gun is ready to go. Now once I fire it once, the slide will open up, it'll eject the empty case, it'll chamber a new one, and so on until the gun locks open with an empty magazine. Once that happens, I can pull the mag out, it drops the slide for me, it pops the barrel up, and I'm ready to reload and continue. Now, part of the reason for this was these early guns were designed with civilians in mind. So a lot of the early ones were actually in 25 ACP, and they're much smaller than this version. And part of the idea was you didn't want to have a hammer that would snag on clothing. So this striker-fired idea helped in that regard. It also meant you didn't have to either manually cock the hammer or else worry about carrying around a gun with a cocked hammer that could fire unintentionally. This double action trigger and striker system obviated all of those concerns. Now, one of the most interesting versions of this is the military version, where the magazine actually had a little loop on the base plate that would hold a single extra cartridge so that you could load the mag and then pull that cartridge out, put it in the barrel when you loaded the gun. So it came all set with a full complement of ammunition. The civilian ones typically did not have that extra feature. What they did have, though, is this really interesting and unusual system for a mainspring. So let me take the grip panel off and show you that. It's a little bit like a Webley automatic pistol, but not quite the same. So here is the mainspring. There is no spring up here in the slide. Instead, there's a very heavy coil spring running right here in the front of the grip. And then you have this, basically a bell crank coming down that hooks onto the mainspring here. And this lug is locked into the slide. Now there's an equivalent, there's a copy of this on the other side, so you've got a pair of these. But what happens is when you run the slide, this bell crank is locked in position right here, and it pivots around this point, which means we have a lot of travel of this long arm for the slide to come back, corresponding to a very short amount of travel of this short arm. So you've got very little compression of the spring going on, but that still translates into enough force and travel to work the slide effectively. So a really interesting solution to having a mainspring. It's a very compact solution. It means you don't have a spring floating around up here somewhere that you have to deal with. And in theory, it also means, because you've got very little compression of the spring, that mainspring should last a very long time. Springs where you have a lot of travel and you're compressing and releasing them over long distances are going to fatigue more over their lifespan. Now, in this view, we can also see the tail of the trigger striker assembly. So you can see there's a trigger spring right there that is pushing on that. I think you get the idea of what's going on up there. And lastly, just to make things even a little bit more efficient, the spring that provides tension for the barrel latch is also this spring. So they don't need to have an extra spring to do that. Now there is also a coil spring down here that's pushing the barrel up, but the spring tension on the latch itself comes from the mainspring. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. There are not a lot of these pistols in the United States, and this particular one is in really outstanding condition. If you would like to own it yourself, add it to a collection of French pistols, or just a collection of interesting pistols, take a look at the link in the description text below. That will take you to Rock Island's catalog page on the pistol, where you can take a look at their pictures and description, and you can place a bid online right there from the catalog, should you decide you just can't live without it. Thanks for watching.